Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and yes, that's right, folks. We're back. We're back with the Truth Attack. Okay, so I got a lot of stuff I want to go through tonight, so let's just get right into it. We are the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we do need the support of the members of the listening audience to keep the network operating and the broadcast coming. So, you're not already a supporting member, we sure would appreciate it if you could find your way over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website. Get signed up as a subscribing member, even if it's as little as $10, $20 a month. Every bit helps, and we do need your support to keep the network operating. And if you want to get fully informed on the maladministration of the federal income tax by the IRS, the DOJ, and the federal judges of the federal courts for the last 50 years, you need to find your way over to tax-freedom.com and start reading, or find your way over to irszoom.com and pick yourself up a copy of either The Simple Truth About Income Tax for just $4. It's a 75-page PDF download, or you can get the complete compendium and the American Tax Bible for just $50. So get informed, get educated, become part of the awakening. Freedom comes from God, not government. The truth shall make you free. And God's true plan for mankind is freedom derived through faith in God, not government. You place your faith in any entity besides God, it will be used against you to betray you and enslave you to the entity in whom you misplaced your faith. And that, my friends, is the history of the government of humanity throughout all time, who until the creation of America were nothing but slaves as the common man to either the king or the emperor or the Shah or the Pharaoh or the Tsar or the Queen or whatever. Man has existed as slaves, and where it wasn't the government, it was the church, putting their faith in the church instead of God, enslaved by each to the extent capable. That is the history of mankind. A misplaced faith that is used to enslave men. And America became the first nation of kings. We, the people, retained the sovereign powers for ourselves and our states and created the federal government under a constitutional republic, not a democracy, that provides for a limited government of limited powers that are specifically enumerated and specifically granted. And any power not specifically granted to the federal government is reserved to either the states or we, the people, the true sovereign in America. It's a representative government, folks. Who do they think they represent, if not the sovereign? And who then would be the sovereign, if not we, the people, whom the central government specifically represents? The states manage their own affairs, on their own lands, under their own constitutions, under their own law. The federal government doesn't represent the states. The states are given powers in the Constitution to defend their own interests, and were given a mechanism through the appointment of senators to defend them. Now, the states have walked away from that authority and power and no longer defend their own rights, with half of them seemingly willing to let the federal government take over the governing of all authorities, including those that should have been reserved to the states, like energy, environment, abortion, education, transportation, communication. I mean, these were all state functions that admittedly might need some interstate regulation by the federal government, but they're primarily state functions that, in order for the federal government to assume completely control of, would need an amendment to get you there. So we need to return to faith in God and an enforcement of the rule of law rather than liberal theology that excuses criminal behavior and allows it to continue unpunished under the bleeding heart compassion that is intended but results in an army of criminals that prey on the general population with impunity. And my friends, that's where we're arriving at now, today. If you don't believe that, go to the nearest Democrat-run city at 8 o'clock at night and take a walk around downtown. Go ahead. I dare you. So how bad is it getting? Well, the Democratic administrations all over the country have decided they're not going to represent the American people anymore. They're going to represent and budget for the illegal aliens, the 10 million illegal aliens they've let in. They need them to vote blue. So now the money's going to get spent on them, not Americans. The Americans can remain homeless on the streets, jobless at work, penniless in the store, hungry, without shelter, in need of medical aid of all sorts. But no, that's not what the Democrats are addressing. They're passing out credit cards for the illegal aliens. They're giving them food, shelter, priority, job cards, and they're going to take the wages, the jobs at the low end of the spectrum away from Americans and may operate to put pressure on minimum wage laws as they're willing to work under the table for less money and not able to complain too loudly to anyone about it, risk of being deported. Although, admittedly, that's not a concern right now under this administration, but it may become one under the next. So, how bad is it getting? Well, in Massachusetts, I think this is in Boston, the mayor of the city, I'm not sure if it's the governor, I don't think so, I think it's the Boston mayor, who is asking the citizens of Massachusetts to open their homes to let a family of illegal aliens move in with them because the state and the city don't have any more money or facilities. They're all filled up and over budget. So does that mean we're going to need to amend the Third Amendment eventually? Probably pretty soon, because once it becomes an idea, it isn't long after that the Democrats decide to mandate it, right? So you might want to wear a mask 2 months later. You have to wear a mask. Okay, so does that mean we have to amend, the Third Amendment, the one that prohibits the quartering of troops in the homes of American families without permission? Looks like we're going to need to amend it to prohibit the quartering of troops or any other person or party without the permission of the homeowner. I don't believe it ever occurred to the founding fathers that they might need to put into protection for American citizens from their government ordering them to house illegal aliens. Oh dear. Okay. Yeah, and of course we keep hearing on the TV, the Democrats keep yelling, it's not his age, he's not too old, he's not, and technically, I think they're right. I've known lots of people who were Biden's age, who were physically strong and mentally competent. Technically, they're right. It's not his age. It's his senility. It's his inability to talk. It's his I'm wearing diapers walk. It's his cowardice in confronting questions, reporters, the press conference, speaking to the American people and opposing the enemies of America around the world, like Iran, North Korea, Putin, etc., etc. Oh, he's opposing. No, he's not opposing Putin. He had the opportunity to stop the Ukrainian war. All he had to do was help the Ukrainians defend their border in the beginning as Russia was massing its troops on the other side of the border preparing for invasion. When the enemy masses troops on your border, you either put up defenses to confront and stop him right there on the border, or you are inviting him in. Biden watched for 2.5 months as the Russians massed troops and armor readying for an invasion into Ukraine. And what did Biden say? Oh, he didn't want to help the Ukrainians defend their border because he might provoke Putin. He was afraid he would provoke. This coward didn't defend the border, which was your only opportunity to stop the invasion. And now it's devolved into a never-ending artillery battle that Russia is well prepared and able to fight, and we've run out of artillery shells. We've given them all to the Ukraine. We have to spend money to make more because our commanding officers, our military leadership, never in their life anticipated that the next major war we had to engage in would be a never-ending artillery battle. They had planned on doing everything from the air, but Joe won't let them do that either. No attacking Russia from the air. And they didn't stop him in the beginning. All you had to do was to deploy. You could have ended this on day one. He lost this war on day one when he refused to deploy to defend the border. So that pretty much is a hopeless battle now. The Ukrainians are doing well to have done what they've done and holding out for so long. But like I say, Russia has endless troops and endless artillery shells and can just sit there and do this forever, destroying every part of Ukraine that gets shelled out. And then, of course, we're going to be expected to pay for that too, right? So Biden is creating a multi-trillion-dollar crisis with this $100 billion war. Gee, Joe, good job. Is that where you're planning to print the next 30 trillion to be spent for the Ukrainian rebuilding of Europe while America goes homeless, hungry, and sick? Oh yeah, that's right. While housing the illegal aliens? Good God. The world's gone absolutely mad. It's turned upside down. And you know, the Democrats know it. Have you seen the video about Joe, the new political ad video out? It's him talking for 30 seconds, 2 minutes. In 2 minutes of talking, there are 30 edit cuts. Every sentence is a different cut, a different cut, a different cut, a different cut. He can't say more than one sentence in a row with emphasis or meaning in his voice. So they have to do 30 takes to get each sentence just right and then cut them all together. There's 6 cuts in a 15-second video they're putting out and 30 in the 2.5-minute video. They know he can't talk. He's gone, people. He's gone. And they're going to run him again. Okay, I think I hear the first commercial break coming up. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour. Get on over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website. Get signed up as a subscribing member, and we'll be back in 5. Okay, this is Thomas Frieda on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth of Tech Hour, and let's just get right back into it. I got a whole bunch of notes here on stuff I wanted to mention, and we've only just gotten started. I've told you before that the whole purpose of bringing in these illegal aliens by the Democratic Party and Joe Biden and the cabal that's taken over the White House, so the radical far left progressive cabal that has turned Joseph Biden from a middle-of-the-road Democrat into a far-left radical communist progressive. This party has been bringing in the illegal aliens in order to register them to vote in California, New York, and Illinois, the states where American citizens are leaving, and which, as a consequence of that, will be losing seats in Congress and in the Electoral College, diminishing their power in elections and in the state. So to replace those citizens who are leaving, they're bringing in these poor, uneducated, non-English speaking, welfare dependent, unskilled labor that will be dependent upon government services, and there I vote for the party that provides the most government services at the expense of the productive, the hardworking, or the wealthy in society. So they think they're going to vote blue. That's why they're not letting in Cubans. Cubans hate socialism and vote red. Part of why Florida has become a red state. Much of the Hispanic community there has said bye to the Democrats' peonage plantation and said, we want freedom. We saw what Fidel did to Cuba, and we think the Democrat Party is doing the same thing here. So they don't let in Cubans, but they let in all the other uneducated, unskilled, poor, welfare dependent, sick, illegal aliens because they need them to vote. And they're already registering them to vote. So you can't say that's not going to happen. And they, oh, but they're only being registered to vote in the state elections. Yeah, but the state runs the federal elections and holds the election at the same polling places as the state election. So you really think these illegal aliens, once they're giving a voter ID card, will be able to tell the difference between one election or the other at the same polling place? Especially when they're being encouraged to just vote, even though it's a federal crime. Federal crimes don't get enforced in democratic states, do they? That's right. So all these illegal aliens are going to be voting to solidly lock the Democrats in place in these states where they're being brought and given shelter and staying. They're going to be voting to solidify the Democrat power in that state and to prevent the loss of seats in Congress and in the Electoral College, because the illegal aliens they're not just only being registered to vote, they are being counted in the census. And their counts are being used to apportion seats in Congress to the states and to apportion votes in the Electoral College to the states. So what you're going to have is 10 million aliens, 3% of the population, voting blue. And in the last few election cycles, the elections have been decided by less than a percentage. 3% to the blue will swing the election. And that's what the Democrats are planning. And that's how they're planning to prevent themselves from being weakened as a political party by the bad policies and the exodus consequences that result in the states from citizens leaving because of the high taxes, the high crime, the invasive regulations, the difficult business environment, the state's lack of support for businesses. It's willing to let the homeless and the mentally ill destroy the businesses by chasing away customers, by camping on the front door, on the sidewalk. This is a recipe for complete and total social anarchy, chaos, and collapse. Surprise! That's the whole point for the Democrats, isn't it? It's right out of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Tear down everything that exists, because the population will never accept even a discussion about a new form of government until the existing form is completely and totally dysfunctional and a total catastrophic failure. Then they think will be willing to have a discussion about a new government. And surprise, it's not going to be a constitutional republic this time. It's going to be a democracy where they can use the media to create the appearance of a majority on any issue they wish to address and seize control of. And then they'll use the majority rules, maxim of democracy, to seize control of and rule the people on every single issue, on every single element of our existence and our freedom and our liberty, thus destroying it all. Because half the population put their faith in a political agenda, socialism, instead of God. So, Joe the Uniter has intentionally given us the man who took office because he was going to unite the American people and represent everybody, has intentionally given us an immigration policy that has triggered the beginning of what may turn into the second Civil War. Texas and 26 states are arrayed along the Texas border telling the federal government to get out. And of course, the immigrants, turns out all you needed was a fence. Everywhere where Texas has seized control of the border, it's under control. It went from 10,000 a day to 10 people a day. And they've all gone to, yeah, that's right, Arizona and California, the states where there is no fence. Because Joe opened up the gates, took off the motors that made them work, and sold off everything that was there ready to build the wall. Just wrote it off. He didn't want it sitting there so that when Trump comes back into power, it could be used. So they sold it for scrap. They paid full value and sold it for scrap. This is how the Democrats waste your money to prevent things in law that they don't want to do. You can't buy those materials unless the contract that let the money to do so was authorized by law in Congress. And Joe decided he didn't like that law either, just like he didn't like the law that makes it a crime to transport, bring in, aid and abet, harbor, shelter, shield from detection, or conceal illegal aliens, Title 8, Section 1324. I mean, that's the only statute you need. Under that statute, Trump should go after and prosecute every single Democrat administration in the country and every single city running sanctuary city policies. Sanctuary city policy and its advocacy and establishment is a federal crime under Title 8, Section 1324. If you're looking for a statute to weaponize against the Democrats, President Trump, I suggest you look at this one. It's a year in jail, up to 20 years in jail for every single illegal alien involved. And we know how many there are because they're being counted in the census. Which I meant to say earlier, if you're going to count them in the census, you have to segregate them so that they're not used to apportion representation in Congress and voting in the Electoral College. It's okay to know how many are there, but you can't use them to apportion government representation. The government is supposed to represent Americans, not illegal aliens, not Venezuelan gang members or Mexican cartel members, or Honduras or Chinese, or Angolan or Ethiopian or Nigerian or Syrian or all the countries that they're coming from by the thousands to, as they say, get on the dole, or rather, as they used to say. Hey, I'm willing to argue and claim and assert the Supreme Court violated the law with its order that Texas had to let the federal government come in and take down the fences. That order had the effect of aiding and abetting the illegal transport and crossing of illegal aliens into the country. The Supreme Court is guilty in that order of aiding and abetting the illegal aliens coming. Now, if you didn't have tens of thousands of people right on the other side of the river, the Supreme Court would be right. Go in there and the federal government has to have access because there isn't a problem that's right on the other side. But in this case, there was a problem right on the other side. To take down the fence was actually to illegally, in violation of Title 8, Section 1324, the Supreme Court aided and abetting the crossing of illegal aliens into the country. So the dissent in that case was right, and the opinion was off the wall. And it's part of the reason why you have this confrontation building that looks like another civil war. And of course, what we really have happening, and I tell people all the time, this country has been afflicted with a mental illness. It's TDS, a very, very serious mental illness. Trump derangement syndrome. And it has completely infected the Democrat Party and destroyed the minds of most of the people in that party who have lost the ability to rationally accept facts and discuss matters rationally. Half the people in this country still think Russian collusion is real, and the Democrats are bringing it back. Everything that's being said is all Russian disinformation. Everything about Joe being corrupt and taking millions from foreign governments and funneling them through 20 LLCs with all the bank records, all the testimony of the witnesses, all of that is Russian disinformation. They think the American people are stupid enough to fall for that lie again. And you know what? They're right. Half of them are already buying into it. Oh, that's Russian disinformation. Saying that the border issue is a Biden problem, that's Russian disinformation. Saying that crime is rampant in the cities, that's Russian disinformation. Saying that Joe is senile, that's Russian disinformation. That's not evidence on video for every American citizen in the world to look at because half of them won't look. They're in denial. I don't know if that makes them all Egyptian or not, but they're in denial. Joe the Uniter has given us a second civil war. Good job, Joe. And you see what the federal government, the Federal Reserve Bank says, they're not going to lower interest rates. They're obsessed with the employment reports, which they think are too strong and too good, but they're not. When you look inside of them, all these jobs allegedly being created aren't full-time jobs, they're part-time. In fact, full-time jobs are going away as companies lay people off and don't hire anymore. The jobs are part-time jobs being taken by people having to take a second job or seniors going back to work because they can't make ends meet in the high-price environment of Joe Biden's catastrophic economy with a 20% collective inflation rate across the 3 years. And it's 40 to 50% on some items like fuel, gasoline, diesel oil, natural gas, electric bills. But the Fed wants a 4% unemployment rate before they lower interest rates, which will destroy the American economy. It's already faltering and weak. You push it to 4% unemployment. We're already at a 62.5% labor participation rate, which is the lowest in 50 years. Gosh dang it, what's going on here? Can I Hi. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and let's just get right back into it. As I was saying when we broke for commercial, the Federal Reserve Bank is not going to lower interest rates because they're looking for a 4% unemployment rate, which, waiting for that to occur, will drive America, Main Street, into a recession, if not a depression. Right now, the short-term interest rate is at 4.6%. The long-term interest rate is 4.2%. And because the short-term rate is higher than the long-term rate, the banks aren't lending on Main Street because they borrow at the short-term rate to lend at the long-term rate. And as long as there's an inverted yield where the short-term rate is higher than the long-term rate, that means the banks lose money. They lose money on every loan they make, automatically built into the loan. So when they lose money, they don't make loans. So they've cut off lending on Main Street. They've cut off capital access. And America is strangling. Main Street is dying for cash because all of the capital printed by the government for COVID in 2020 has found its way into the hands of the institutions. They printed $12 trillion. In 2020, they upped the M1 money supply, readily available cash assets, from 4.5 trillion to 16 trillion, and drove it to 20 trillion 2 years later by 22. So they've printed $17 trillion in the last 3 years. It's all found its way into the hands of the institutions, which now have $4.5 trillion sitting on the sidelines at the stock market and money market accounts, earning 4.5% at the short-term rate, looking for an opportunity to buy into a market at all-time highs on any pullback or drawback. And the market, of course, is outrageously overrun at this point. At some point, the reality on Main Street and around the world, which is also falling into recession, depression realities, Germany, Japan, China, all of these economies are faltering, and when they do, they take down the entire region. Germany takes down Europe, Japan takes down Asia, China takes down the rest of Asia. Australia doesn't contribute. South America is faltering. Africa is not really a factor. All over the planet. And the Fed's cutting off funds to mainstream America. Well, Main Street dies, Wall Street parties. It's the Roaring Twenties. And how did the Roaring Twenties end? Oh yeah, that's right. With the Great Depression, which was created by a lack of access to capital on Main Street. When the banks stopped lending because the margin calls on the market fall in 29 consumed all the free capital, and after those calls and the market collapse and loss of asset values, the banks no longer saw a credit-worthy public that they could safely lend into, so they stopped. And every month, the existing loans have to be repaid at the bank, which retires more and more capital from circulation. And eventually, you have people standing in lines for bread, for work, for shelter, for transportation, for virtually everything. And nothing can be done. Not because there isn't a desire to do things, not because there isn't work that needs to be done, but because there's no capital currency left in circulation for anyone to be able to do anything. And of course, how this occurs in a moment is as capital becomes harder and harder to acquire, people suddenly, all together at the same time, decide to stop spending and hoard the capital they have. And then it falls off the cliff. Like I said, right now, you have 4.6 on the short term, 4.2 on the long term. All you gotta do, guys, is bring it down 0.5 point to terminate the inverted yield curve that has put this damper, this stop sign, up at the banks. You need to start the lending again, or you're going to cause the recession. This is being done by the Federal Reserve Bank intentionally because they want a 4% unemployment rate, because they're afraid if they lower interest rates, it will trigger inflation. I don't think the Fed understands the inflation we've experienced came out of energy policy, not monetary policy. And because of that, you can't fix it with monetary policy. The short-term interest rate never should have been raised this far to begin with. You can't fix problems resulting from energy policy with changes in monetary policy. You have to change the energy policy to fix the problems created by the energy policy. I mean, that's just all there is to it. And the only way to fix the problems created by the bad energy policy put in place by Biden on day one is to drill, baby, drill. Finish the pipeline, lease the fields, release the permits, turn the American industrial engine back on in the arena of petroleum, oil, and energy. That's the only way to get there. And if you don't do it quick, these prices are never going back down. If you do it in the next election, there's a chance that oil going back, gasoline going back, diesel going back to $2 a gallon and $2.50 for diesel. There's a chance the prices will come down a little. But if you don't do it in this election cycle, you're going to be stuck with these prices and higher forever. Because in the next 2 years, you are going to have inflation from monetary policy as the government lets another $2 trillion in foolish spending under the green infrastructure bill to build bridges to nowhere and roads to Hawaii. So we got a problem and nobody's talking about it. Nobody sees it. Everybody says, oh, things are going along just fine. Yeah, if you're on Wall Street. But like I say, it's run higher than it should. And at some point, reality is going to hit and it's all going to come back. So Joe Biden is out there again with another unconstitutional attempt to buy votes with a direct subsidy to the students by giving out another $1.2 billion in loan forgiveness for 150,000 students, 1.2 billion affecting 150,000 students. So the total now is 138 billion for 3.9 million borrowers has been forgiven illegally and unconstitutionally by Joe Biden, who blames the Republicans for shutting him down on the issue once, when actually it was the Supreme Court that shut him down for stealing the money from the Treasury, for unconstitutionally usurping the authority of Congress and exercising the power of the purse. The power of the purse is both the power to spend and the power to forgive. That's held by Congress, not Joe. This is an unconstitutional usurpation of the powers of Congress not given to the executive branch. This man has to be stopped. You need to sue him again. Stop all this giveaway and put the loans back in place. The solution, the proper solution to this problem is for Congress to put student debt back into the bankruptcy courts. The problem is that this debt is forever. It can't be bankrupted out no matter how destitute or poor you become or how unfortunate or ill you get. You can't bankrupt it out. That's the problem. You can fix this student debt problem by putting it back into the bank. Allow bankruptcy. Then people who can't pay have an escape. And the result isn't to pass the debt to the American people. Those who worked hard and didn't go to college and have a job and a skill and are working as plumbers, electricians, carpenters, truck drivers. Why should those hardworking men have to pay for the wealthy students who got to go to school, but got the wrong degree and can't get a job that lets them pay for the debt? Because they got brainwashed into believing everything is fairy tales and rainbows and personal choices and freedoms and safe spaces. Why should we pay for their nonsense? You want to fix the problem, put it back in the bankruptcy court. Anyone who can't do it can file for bankruptcy, and they alone will bear the consequence for the bankruptcy. This isn't being forgiven, as the Democrats like to portray and Joe likes to pretend. It's being passed to the taxpayers and assumed by them without an act of Congress, making them responsible for repaying the money. The debt doesn't go away. It got borrowed from the Federal Reserve Bank. It was given to the students. They gave it to the colleges. Put it in bankruptcy court and or make the university endowments repay a percentage, 50%. Don't let these students take terrible degree programs that won't get them a job because it will bounce back on the university and cause it to lay cash out of the endowment fund. That'll fix the problem. No more degrees in fairy tales and rainbows and unicorns. Learn something, a skill, a knowledge that people will pay to have done or for help with the issue. So this is just buying votes, outright, unconstitutional, illegal, bribing the citizens to buy votes. And unfortunately, it's been effective, which is why it's got to be shut down and stopped. The students have to be told, you can't think you're going to get this money because the next president is going to shut this down in the Supreme Court. And all the money's going to go back on your bill because it can't be forgiven by the president. That's illegal. And how sick is this? Well, it was reported, I saw, Joe Biden and his wife, Dr. Jill, were paid in 1 year, I don't know what year it is, they made $48,500 in Social Security. Collectively, they were paid $4,000 a month in Social Security payments to a man who made in that year $11 million in income. Why is someone who made $11 million being given money from a fund that was intended for widows and orphans and the poor unfortunates who slipped through the cracks and couldn't make it? Is that Joe at 11 million? I'll buy the part about slipped through the cracks and couldn't make it, but I'm not buying the part about can't afford his own stuff or life. I'm not buying the part about he needs support from the government. I'm not buying the part about how a tax is actually an entitlement to be used and relied on as a pension and a retirement program. That ain't the deal, guys. It's a tax. There's no guarantee you'll get a penny out of Social Security. There's no money in any count. It's all done with book entries. All the money taken from your paycheck is sent to the Federal Reserve Bank. It's all done on account. They just change the numbers in the computer. And that anytime Congress decides it can't fund the program anymore, they can vote to not appropriate funds to fund the payments that are due that year, and that's it, the program's over. The tax isn't over, just the part where you get money is. Because it is a tax, nothing else. And Congress can't use it in any other way, if they ever get it. So why is Social Security? The solution to Social means test the recipients. Anybody with $500,000 or more in gross net worth, assets minus liabilities, shouldn't be getting Social Security. And it should be graduated from some level down. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. I hear the end of the show coming up. Gee, I only got through half of the stuff. What are we going to do about this? We'll be back next week with more.